Ready? All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, despite the heat advisory or whatever. Thank you, virtual audience, for joining us. Tonight is the publication day party for Meg Gardiner and her new unsub book called Shadow Heart. So, since you have a little cup, let's raise a toast to Meg and thank her for coming and congratulate her. Yay. You are so welcome. So I pointed out to Meg that this is the 36th anniversary year of Silence of the Lambs. How many of you remember when Silence of the Lamb published and then there was like every book was a serial killer thriller? Remember that? No, none of you are as old as I am, so you don't remember that. But it's true that there was, and that's how it works in publishing, isn't it? That there will be a hit book and then many people rush to write the same book, but there's a cycle involved. And so we haven't seen as many really good serial killer thriller. I love the way it all sort of rhymes for a long time. So I'm really happy that Meg has produced a new unsub book with her FBI agent, who is not Clarice Starling, but who is
Not
in
at
fact,
all.
tell us about her.
Caitlin Hendricks is young, not as young as Clarice. Caitlin is her own woman. She was recruited to the FBI to join the behavioral analysis unit out of the Alameda County Sheriff's Department in California. As she was a very young detective in the first book, she said she was as green as pea soup as an investigator. But she is the daughter of a cop. She was, in other words, sort of born to wear a badge. She knew that was what she wanted to do, and it's to her credit and detriment that that's the path she's taken. There's a lot of bad people out there, and people ask me whether Caitlin's going to continue, whether she has more cases to solve, and I say, well, as long as human nature is what it is, she'll always have a job. So she finds great satisfaction. She's very driven. She takes the weight of the world on her shoulders sometimes to solve everything, to fix the world. As she's slowly through the books learning that is an impossible task and unhealthy for her to think that is something she should or can do. So she is. She's near and dear to my heart. She's driven. She's funny. I think if she lived next door to you, you'd want her to be a good friend of yours. And well, she also carries a gun and she knows how to shoot. She knows how to aim at the bad guys. So it would be helpful. But she's back in this book hunting not one but two serial killers. So
is the FBI normally the serial killer unit, or can it be local? And I'm thinking about this guy in New York City who
the Gilgo Beach
yeah,
killings.
exactly.
Yes.
But his killings are in New Jersey, right?
They're in New York, in Long Island.
Oh, they are in Long Island. But
No.
there's another guy who has apparently worked the beach in New Jersey, if I remember.
Probably. Sadly, they think there could be thousands of unidentified serial killers in the United States, but serial killing is murder, and murder is a state crime. So police departments handle that. The FBI gets involved as a resource, as a coordination nexus. Caitlin works for a unit that is part of the critical incident response team within the FBI, and the BAU, despite what you may have seen on Criminal Minds, it does not initiate investigations. Their agents are not street cops. They don't go out and like a patrol officer and collect evidence and solve the murders. They are advisory. They are asked to come into a case by the prosecution or by local police departments who want their expertise to help them decipher the evidence, to do behavioral analysis, to maybe help, be part of a task force if it involves multiple jurisdictions. So, and of course, as an author, seeing that gives me the breadth to send Caitlin wherever I want her to go, anywhere in the country, to deal with anything I want her to deal with.
So once the FBI established this behavioral unit, and created a database. Has that made it harder for serial killers? I mean, because at one point everything was so fragmented, with a serial killer that the odds were that you couldn't actually coordinate.
It's still there's still quite a bit of fragmentation and the siloing of information within independent with different departments, between even counties within a state, certainly across state lines. The FBI has tried in a number of ways, and there's actually a new book about this just out last week. Frank Figluzzi's book, Long Haul, about the FBI it's the Highway Serial Killing Initiative, which that looks at gathering information and creating a gigantic database and sharing resources among departments about killer truckers, basically. No offense to the trucker industry, which makes our everything about our daily lives possible, but some state investigative agencies and the FBI realized that there were cases of victims who were picked up at one site, say at a truck stop in Albuquerque, perhaps murdered in Amarillo, and then their body was left in Oklahoma City. So there was no national way to understand, like, somebody's got a missing person out of Albuquerque, that's not going to get connected to an unidentified body that's found in Oklahoma. So they put together this Highway Serial Killing Initiative.
Well, I mean, there's certainly mobile serial killers, and then there are local serial killers, often disguised by having families of their own, like the serial killer in Kansas. What's he called? The BT something, right?
BTK.
Yeah.
Yes.
A guy that had, and actually the Long Island guy had a family.
Correct. He had an architectural firm in Manhattan,
Right.
and a family. And the neighbors now are saying, well, he was really weird and we were scared of him. But
Right, but not scared enough.
No,
apparently.
I mean, but that's part of the reason I think we're fascinated by killers like this, and why I'm curious about to write about them, is that so often these people present as average members of society. And the Dennis Rader, who was the BTK killer in Wichita, he was a member of his church. He was a church elder. He was a Boy Scout leader. He appeared to all, to every appearance, he was Mr. Average, Mr. Normal. So what is it that they're hiding, and how would someone like Caitlin rip off their mask and identify them?
No, it's really interesting, and sometimes there are pairs of them. Folie à deux. I used to love that because when I was an undergraduate at Stanford, somebody started a winery called Folie à deux, which is French for crazy together, crazy two people. And I always loved that. And I wondered if they'd actually thought about, like, Myra Hinckley and, whatever, because there are instances where together they might not do these terrible things, but it doesn't have to be male female either. Sometimes it can be
right, a dyad of teenage boys,
or just two guys, or copycats, or whatever. I mean, there's a whole wealth of information. I used to think that Jack the Ripper, was never really apprehended because he came back to America.
I think he was the Midnight Assassin from Austin?
I don't know that he had a name, but there was some tie to Chicago or something. But anyway, I've often thought that, nobody really knows what happened to him or whatever, but one possibility is that he emigrated, and nobody was keeping any kind of real statistics back in the 1890s or 80s, whenever it was. So he could have gone anywhere and continued. And maybe today, I wonder sometimes, somebody today will be able to find, victims, a pot of victims somewhere else, and maybe make a connection.
It is. Well, what kicked off the whole series was my memory and fascination and horror at the concept of the Zodiac. I grew up in Southern California. I was a little kid, remember looking in the newspaper and seeing a police sketch of this. It was a police sketch. We were supposed to identify the man with the hood, with just a big black hood with a weird symbol on it, and asking, Daddy, who's that? And having to have my parents explain to me what the Zodiac was, and realizing that he's never been officially identified. He's certainly never been captured. He could still be out there. So I thought, okay, he stopped? Was he in prison? Did he move to Scotland? What's to stop him from picking up where he left off? So that was the genesis of Unsub, and in all the books there is a kernel of an actual crime that has sparked the story. It's something that's grounds it in a bit of actual murder investigation and a real case. I think now this breakthrough with genetic genealogy is making a big difference. That has been such a game changer, and I don't know that I ever told you, certainly not everybody else here, that I was already writing and published when I found out that a serial killer had been active in the neighborhood where I grew up.
No, I didn't know that. How terrifying.
Nobody knew it. Really? There was a series of murders in Santa Barbara, in Goleta, California, in the 80s, and nobody put it together with anything wider or more extensive than just that neighborhood. The sheriff's department thought it was the thuggish family that lived on the corner, that maybe one of their kids was involved in it. And when he was killed in a drug deal, they closed the investigation. Well, 2 decades later, a big announcement came out that said that these murders had been connected to what they were then calling the original Night Stalker, the Golden State Killer. And that was just shook me terribly, because I looked at I looked on Google Maps and I saw, okay, this was less than 400 yards from where my parents and my little brother and sister had been sleeping the night of one of these killings. We figured out, my brother and I immediately called my brother and said, look at this. No, I said, look out your kitchen window. And he said, yeah, I'm looking across the street at those condos. And I said, that's the crime scene.
Wow.
And
So, it's kind of, unfortunately, victims, are they generally random, or are they often picked for some kind of profile that only develops once you try to figure out what it is?
The profile developed, certainly for the Golden State Killer. He liked to attack people in their homes. Okay. He often attacked couples. He had attacked one couple across the street from where my best friend from high school lived, tied them up. The boyfriend managed to get free and run naked into the street, and happened to have an FBI agent who lived across the street who gave chase to this attacker through the neighborhood, past my friend's house, but he got away. And it was only later they realized, of course, he was using the creek where we used to catch tadpoles in the, after school, that he was splashing down the creek to get to his car where he'd parked it on the other side of the freeway. But it was extraordinarily disturbing. And it took me a while to think, gosh, has this influenced me in ways that I hadn't possibly anticipated, as far as my sense of security and my interest in writing stories where I can at least have catharsis and have Caitlin put people behind bars. So it was amazing sense of relief for me and my whole family when D'Angelo was arrested.
So since you brought that up, let's go back and talk about your early career, because you may not know that
I was a serial killer.
Meg, this is not autobiography, seriously. Meg won an Edgar for her very first novel. It was a paperback. There is still a category in the Edgars for paperback original. And tell us about it, because it was your first published book, and you were living in England when you wrote it.
I'm a Southern California girl. Grew up in Santa Barbara, and was married with 3 small children when my husband's job was transferred to London. So that gave me a chance to switch from, originally I practiced law. And thank you, my dear law school friends, for coming out to see what has become of me after all this time.
You didn't think it would be serial killers, did you? No.
So then I taught at the University of California, Santa Barbara. I taught legal research and writing. And when we moved to London for my husband's job, I had time at last. All the kids were at least in preschool, and I said, I've been talking about writing a novel for years, and if I don't use this opportunity, I never will. So it's time to put up or shut up. So I wrote a novel.
Which was called?
I threw it away. It was so terrible.
It was called I Threw It Away. I love it. That's a catchy title. And then you wrote another book.
Then I wrote another book called, I wrote one, and then I wrote another one that was called Against the Tide, and I got an agent with that, and he said, by the way, this is the most boring title I've ever heard in my life. We're going to change it. He tried to sell it, and when I realized that it was a slog for him, I decided, you know what, I'd better start something new. And I looked around at shelves in a bookstore like this, and I said, I need to raise my game. That I can't just write something that's bouncy and fun and has 100 pages of banter with 500 characters and no plot. If I want to be on the shelves at someplace like Poison Pen, I really need to figure out exactly how high that bar is, and I got to learn to clear
that
it.
a plot works best in a mystery.
Yes,
it really does.
Well, yeah, the book that ended up getting kicked into the trash. I told a friend, I said, I'm writing a murder mystery, and I told her all about it, and she said, that's great. Except, you know what? Nobody in this story dies.
Oops. Oops. So it couldn't be kidnapping?
No. So anyway, so then I wrote China Lake, and that was published. That one sold in the UK and then all around the world. It was translated into many languages, and I could not get arrested in the United States. I couldn't get anybody to publish it. In America, nobody was interested in it. In that book or the next 4 books I wrote. In the Evan Delaney series, nobody in America was interested whatsoever.
But you came here for your 3rd book.
I came here for my 6th book.
6th book. Oh,
But
okay.
I wrote 5 books in the series, and then I decided I better try something. I had an idea for another series about a forensic psychiatrist, and started writing that. And it was at that point that the great gods of fortune and serendipity shined on me when Stephen King picked up China Lake to read on a flight to England.
And an influencer even then. Without
influencer
the
even
internet.
then.
Stephen King, influencer.
He looked at it and he thought this paperback, it has a nice, easy font that's going to be comfortable on my eyes on the plane. So he read it and he liked it, and he encouraged people to find my books. And he wasn't just an influencer. He's the big dog, man. And within 48 hours of him, he wrote a column for Entertainment Weekly, and American publishers strangely changed their minds.
He was an influencer, whatever
Yes.
you say. If he did, he had to do that, right? So some of those, I'm trying to remember, they were set in San Francisco and
All the Joe
California. All
Beckett
of them
novels
were?
about the forensic psychiatrist who consults for the San Francisco police. They're set in the Bay Area. They're set in
what
San
I thought.
Francisco.
Right.
Because I
So-
love to go to San Francisco.
Right. So when you weren't in England, you went
Right,
back
yes.
to San Francisco. Well, it makes perfectly good sense. So since you bring up kidnapping, it's always been one of my favorite stories. No. This is a digression, but that's what we do. Sue Grafton was one of my dearest friends. We were the same age, and my heart still breaks that she didn't get to see. I do have the only unicorn, the only autographed copy of Y, which she sent to me, because she couldn't really write anymore, and it's very shaky. But anyway, she loved to tell this story on herself because, as you know, A is for alibi, B is for burglar, whatever. So it was going to be K is for kidnapping. And her protagonist is a private eye working, as you know, out of Santa Barbara. So she was, I love this story. She was 180 pages into it when she realized that kidnapping is a federal crime. And there was actually no way that Kinsey was going to be investigating the kidnapping. So she had to throw it away and change the title to K is for Killer and start over again. But, you know, it's true that you can have a crime novel that doesn't have a murder in it, but it does need to have some kind of a crime in it. But if it's going to be kidnapping, then it isn't really going to be a private eye case.
So should I bring up the fact that I once stalked Sue Grafton on
Sure, why not? Sue would love all this. If you haven't noticed, we have a portrait of Sue, a photograph of her in the front of the store. And
As I was from Santa Barbara, she was
Yeah.
our hometown hero.
yeah, she was.
I've spent hours in line at Chaucer's Books in Santa Barbara to get her to sign my copy. And one day I was on the US 101 with my 3 small children in car seats in the back of my Honda Accord, and this Mercedes came whipping past me in the fast lane, and I caught the license plate, and it said THNXKNZ. Thanks, Kinsey. And that was my reaction was I thought, that's Sue Grafton, and without even hesitating, I just smashed the gas pedal to the.
Oh my God, you were a stalker.
I started chasing this car, racing up the freeway. We went past my exit. So I'm like slowly in my, like my little blue Honda, slowly trying to gain on this powerful German car. And I don't know what I thought I was going to do when I pulled even with the car, like, make heart hands and. It never occurred to me that, of course, I could just wait until Kay came out and I could meet her again at the bookstore the next time. But I pulled even, and I turned with just like love on my face or something. It was her husband. It was Steve. It was Steve at the wheel of the car.
Right.
So I just slowly kind of backed off and pretended like that had never happened.
He's a professor of philosophy, so not nearly the same. So when we moved to this store in 1999, Sue had worked her way up to M. So I wrote to her and I said, we're going to open the store pretty soon. And she said, is this a slow pitch for me starting my book tour with M? And I said, no, it's a hard pitch for you. So she said she would, and she rearranged her tour. After that, she started all her book tours here, but up until then. Anyway, so we weren't sure what to expect, and we thought maybe there'd be too many people to have a conversation. So we set it up. There was a table over there across from the bathroom, and you could go out the back way. And people could come in, and they could wend their way if we turned the bookcases all the way up here and then all the way around and get down there to that table and exit out the back door. So 1,500 people queued up. They were all around the block. I called the police department, and they sent a car. There was a traffic accident over here, somebody trying to turn into the alley. But what made it memorable was that somebody was drinking strawberry margaritas down here at the end of the block in the tequila factory and wandered down the alley, wandered into the back door, and threw up all over Sue. The strawberry margaritas. So a fan of hers, who was a very hotshot lawyer, was wearing lawyer clothes, a long coat. So she whipped off her coat. She took Sue into the bathroom. She mopped her up. She wrapped her up in her coat. Meantime, one of the staff got out a bucket, the whole bit. And meantime, the girl passed out on the floor.
The girl. We were picturing
it was a girl. No, it was a girl. So we had to call the EMTs or I can't remember what to be. It was a really memorable book event. I know. I was amazed she ever came back to do all the rest of it. But her final, I think it was, she wrote a book called Kinsey and Me. Do you remember that? It was sort of a memoir. It was, I don't remember where it fell in the sequence of the whole thing. So she called me one day and said, I've been looking at flights, she said, and nobody seems to want to do anything with Kinsey and Me, so I thought I'd just come over. Remembering him. And I said, okay, we could do that. And the reason I bring it up is that we caught it on streaming, and you can watch it on YouTube because it was the last recorded thing that she did. So we, again, didn't quite know what to expect, but we didn't think, it wasn't a real book, like a detective book, it would be okay. So Sue and I went across the parking lot to what was then a different pizzeria over here, and we were having a peaceful drink and all, and Patrick, I think it was you, Patrick suddenly appeared right in front of us, and he said, there are people in the parking lot. We are so overloaded. And this was, we realized, the moment when everybody still, had got phones by now. And if we were going to live stream it, people could watch it on their phone in the parking lot. So we printed out the URL for the live stream, gave it to everybody. Sue and I crouched here in the corner. The store was full. The parking lot was packed. And we talked for like an hour and a half. And I really think that is her last, recorded whatever. So if you go home and you look on YouTube and you search for Sue Grafton poison pen, you can find it.
That'd be
But
great. Yeah.
I know, it really was. She was such a special person.
Mhm.
Sorry, that was a huge digression. This is your event, but still, since you're a Sue
Well, no,
Grafton
she was an
fan,
inspiration.
I know.
I had
did you talk to her about shadow ever? You know, her shadow self?
no.
That was her writing self. You know, she called it shadow.
Mm.
You know, that's where the crime stuff bubbled up.
Okay, that makes total sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So, what was the book you came here to talk about?
The first time I came was for the Dirty Secrets Club,
Right. Book 6.
book 6, which was
Okay.
book 1 in the Joe Beckett series.
Okay.
And I think I've been back more times than I
Well,
can
you
count.
have been, but you were still in England, weren't you?
I was.
You came over here for.
I flew in from I flew to the United States to tour for
Right.
that book, which was great.
It
Yeah.
is. So since then, I know you've been, for example, president of the Mystery Writers of America at one
Yep.
point,
Mhm.
right? So you've really embraced the American mystery community.
Well, yeah. Now I live in Austin, so it's much
Not
easier.
London.
Not
Right.
London. No, Austin
Right.
is not London. Yeah, London has. People asked me to explain the difference. I say London has the statue of Lord Nelson in Trafalgar Square, and Austin has the statue of Willie Nelson.
That pretty much sums it
Yes.
up, doesn't it?
So-
Love that.
Yeah, so it's always a treat and a joy to be able to get back here and to be here to talk about the latest book. It's just
Right.
I'm not here.
That's okay. All right. So set us up. I mean, we've talked a little bit around Caitlin, but why don't you give us sort of the pitch for the book?
Okay, in this book, Caitlin is thinks she's starting out just doing an interview for a cold case. As the BAU started famously with FBI agents interviewing convicted killers to try to learn about them, to try to understand their psychology, to get a sense of understanding their behavior, so perhaps they could use that to create profiles for other investigators who were trying to come up with the identity of an unknown subject, which is the FBI lingo for the unknown perpetrator. And so Caitlin goes to interview a convicted killer who has not admitted guilt to the crimes for which he's in prison in Tennessee. Instead, he has started drawing portraits of unidentified women who he claims to have killed across the country over the course of the last 20 years. Okay. And Caitlin goes in with her colleague to do a profile, and the police put out these drawings. Families of the missing all across the country are desperate to figure out if their loved ones could be among his victims. Police departments are trying to figure out, as is the FBI, whether he's lying. And it turns out that somebody out there is not just interested in the pictures, but they are duplicating his crimes. They are they are committing murders and leaving the victims at the sites of Good's killings. So Caitlin all of a sudden has a very hot case that she needs to coordinate with the NYPD, with detectives in Nashville and rural Tennessee, and she realizes that this is not just a simple copycat, but this very active, running around loose killer is somehow competing with the guy in prison, Ephraim Judah Good, he's behind bars, but Caitlin knows he's not harmless. He's a psychopath. He's manipulative. He wants to dominate. He has some agenda that he wants to reach out into the world to enact, but she has to figure out what is going on between these two killers. What are they competing for? What is their rivalry about? What do they think they can win? What's their goal? And she better figure it all out pretty quick because the bodies keep dropping.
So the naive among us might think that people incarcerated don't actually have any contact with the outside world, but that's so not true.
Very not true. I was don't know why I was shocked to find out that some incarcerated serial killers have Facebook fan pages.
Well, I know that some of them, have like romance. I mean,
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
well they're pen pals.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
and
and
some of them have even more than that.
Mhm.
But they apparently are often cell phones are smuggled in or other
Right.
things,
Yeah.
and so they're not as isolated as I mean,
Right.
unless you're in a supermax where maybe none of that happens.
Yeah, this guy is not in super. He's in maximum security, but it's not supermax, and he's not allowed to have a cell phone. He's not allowed to post on social media, as I think not just the prison and the parole boards, but Facebook doesn't allow convicted killers to post. But he can write letters to the administrator of the fan page, and she can post them and sign his name to them.
It's so sick. A serial killer fan page. Yuck. I know, but we know there are instances too where people who are prison guards and other things get sucked into the whole deal.
Oh, quite. And smuggling a cell phone in is not out of the question in any way. And as strange as it, after having set that up, as strange as it is, this book is also about family.
Okay. Not obvious. How did you manage
Well,
to
no,
link
I
them?
mean, I didn't want this just to be a puzzle about how to identify a killer, and are these two killers out there, moving, making moves like on a chessboard. There is a mystery, and I want readers to wonder what the heck is going on. But doing the research for this, one of the things that sparked the story was the case of Samuel Little, who was a convicted killer who did start sketching women he claimed to have killed. And the FBI put up these portraits, and they were, I won't call them beautiful, but they were vivid, they were lifelike, and they were extremely haunting. They were really eerie, and turned out that he did kill a number of these people. But to find out from that case how many families had wondered for decades, well, whatever happened to our cousin, to our daughter? To find out that the victims had never been identified as murder victims in some cases, because they had been found, it was assumed they had died of exposure or an overdose, with no ID, and families were never notified. And to find out how many families were not looking for their loved ones.
Well, maybe loved ones isn't a fair description.
Well, yeah, they're relatives, their family,
Yeah.
but the number of families who were just desperate to try to put a killing to rest, to lay there, to find closure for their loved ones. And so that's an element in the story. There's a teenager who becomes convinced that her birth mother was one of Good's victims, and she wants to see if she can get evidence to prove that, to bring her past into the present, and to try to lay her never identified mother to rest. But of course, she's an 18-year-old, and she's fierce, and she's spunky, and she will do anything. And Caitlin, as an FBI agent, really doesn't need a high school senior getting all up in her business in this case. So that's a part of the story. And it's not totally unconnected to.
No, not at all. So I know that, we even had a person here who was very good at it. There have been forensic reconstructions, for example, when a unidentified body, largely skeletal, there are people who are able to, not just sketch them,
Right.
but, like put skin on. I mean, there was, I think at ASU actually. Right. So there are increasing ways to, to find people. I think the aging thing, where you can take a person and there's software now that can age them over time, may also be another way to work against serial killer, or catch criminals. I mean, so as a writer, do you find that trying to keep up with the actual science is a challenge?
I want to keep up with the science. I think it's fascinating. As a citizen, I'm extremely grateful for it. As a writer, I don't mind it in the least. I hear some people saying, "Oh gosh, we can't." The advent of cell phones has ruined the ability to create a mystery, because now everybody knows everything. Everybody knows exactly where you are, where you were. They can track you. You can get information at your fingertips. You can never be out of touch. And I think, well, you got to find a way to make sure that that'll happen.
That might be true in London. It's not so true in like southern Arizona.
Well, I said a bunch of stories in the California desert where there's not a cell phone tower for 200 miles.
No, it's really true. I mean, I don't know that there is any place that is so saturated with CCTV.
Oh, it's
as
London. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can literally, you are observed in everything in London, except maybe the bathroom in your hotel suite. But
One
the
hopes.
elevators, you name it. And I if you watch British cop shows, what's the first thing they always do? Like Vera or anybody, they immediately collect all the CCTV to see where people are going and solve a lot of cases because they catch some guy in a car or whatever it might be, or the absence of somebody denies their alibi or whatever it is. So but in America we don't have that kind of saturation coverage because we have these big spaces.
Yeah, we do. But you've got to make use of it. You either have to work around it, or you have to turn it to your advantage, and that's part of the fun. And I hope that it's fun for readers as well to say, well, when are they going to get the cell phone records? When will the Google phone have tracked him to that corner of the cow paddock before he did whatever
You
it
would
was he
think
did.
that if you were a criminal and you paid any attention, the first thing you'd know was never to take your cell phone when you were going out to commit a crime.
They do. They
Like,
crime all the time with their phones, and they put it on YouTube.
No, it's just amazing. We had a riot here where there were all these people, the Trash Fashion Square and the Mercedes thing across the street. And, the cops nailed basically all of them because they put it all up on social media and, the whole bit. And you think, of course, I think a lot of them were kids and, kids all think they're immortal and also invisible as far as I can work out. So there we are. So talk to us a bit about Heat.
I'm so happy to see a copy of it right there on your shelf.
Yes, we do.
Heat 2.
And 1.
Yes.
Right. So how did you come to write with Michael Mann, and how is Michael Mann as a writing partner? You can there's nobody watching, so
That's
you can
okay.
be candid.
Yeah. I got a call from my agent who asked if I was interested in writing a novel with Michael Mann, a sequel/prequel to the classic movie Heat. And I took a very deep breath. I thought, Michael Mann is an icon. The Last of the Mohicans, Collateral, The Insider, Ali, Heat. And I thought this would be a huge and daunting project. And then the little devil on my shoulder kind of said, well, you've always wanted to write a heist novel, haven't you? So I said, yes. I mean, Michael Mann has written quite a bit, needless to say, that he is an extraordinarily accomplished writer. All his writing had, until Heat 2, had been as screenplays. So he had wanted to expand the world of this movie, which takes place in a very narrow stretch of time in Los Angeles, just over a few weeks. And he knew where the characters had come from. I presume that everybody here, I hope, has heard of, at least, if not seen, perhaps not 48 times like I have, the film Heat. But he had always wanted to see where the survivors of the film go and to find out where they had come from. And for the film, he had written biographies of all the main characters. For Neil McCauley, played by Robert De Niro, Vincent Hanna, played by Al Pacino, Chris Hurlis, played by Val Kilmer. And he wrote these extensive histories, knowing that none of that material was going to make it into the script. But he wanted to give it to the actors so that would enrich and inform their performances. So he gave all that to me, and I got to see what he had been thinking.
So he'd written screenplays, but he
Yes.
didn't really.
Yes, he wrote the screenplay for Heat.
Right. So structuring a novel is quite different, and that's where you came in.
Exactly. I had never collaborated on a big project. He had never written a novel, so we were both kind of
Versions together.
Exactly.
How often do you get to be a virgin at this age? It's so cool. Right.
So I realized it was going to be a huge project. It was going to be an immense responsibility because these characters had been with him for so long, since before 1995, for years before that. And I had a duty to him and to them to bring them to life, to help him work this out and bring them to life in the most authentic and realistic way that was true to his vision of who these people
Right. So
were.
you actually had to work inside his universe,
Correct,
so to
yes.
speak. You couldn't just take a flyer and do something weird.
I would have lasted 3 weeks on the project if I had
Right.
decided that, Vincent Hanna decides to open a bakery. And
Right. Yeah. That.
so this was in 2020 that we started working on it, which meant that we couldn't get together. It was during COVID. So we were working via phone and email and talking out the story, and knew it was going to span not 3 weeks, but decades, and decide who was going to write what, how we were going to start it, work out an outline. As it's writer stuff, and then I said, I better write you something, because if you don't like what I'm going to write, we need to know it immediately. So I wrote a first few chapters, and he said, let's keep going. So we did.
So that technology that can be a real pain in the ass when you're writing a crime novel is the only thing that enabled you to actually work with Michael Mann on Heat during COVID, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then I finally did. By the time we'd finished the first draft, I was able to go out to Los Angeles and sit down with him, and we just wrestled that thing for a week over his desk to revise it. And we did a lot of research. I'm sure you know that Michael Mann is renowned for the depth of the research he does to bring as much authenticity to the worlds he is entering in the story to the page or the screen. So we did have a several-hour conversation with the bank robber.
Okay.
Retired. He's done his time. He's rehabilitated. Maybe. So for me, who has never done anything more than cash a check at a bank, it was a revelation. However, if you need to know how to do a tunnel job, hit me up. We rode out with the LAPD late one night in South Los Angeles to get a sense of what the streets are really like for the final section of the book, which was that was another kind of education. Mm-hmm. So don't linger on a street corner, even if you're in a truck with a couple of LAPD sergeants, because the ladies on the corner don't want looky-loos hanging around slowing down business, and they can throw a stiletto.
Right through the window? Oh, scary stuff. So you went on then to write Heat 2?
I wrote Heat 2. And people have asked me, how do you collaborate? Because I know there's so many writing partnerships, and everybody does it differently. And we took different cracks at different sections of the book. But by the time we finished polishing it, I think we had both gone over every word multiple times.
Did you create an authentic third voice, which was both of you together? It wasn't you and it wasn't him?
According to my husband, yes. Well, no, because my husband's read all my books, and when I gave him the manuscript for Heat 2, he said, "This is you, but it's not. And this is Michael Mann, but it's not."
Well, I mean, wouldn't that be the ideal, really?
Yeah, I think so. It's a synthesis and a collaboration.
Right.
Yeah. And so if you read the book, you'll see the story that we... it was like, I don't know if you remember the Star Trek episode where Kirk is battling in some cage pit with, like tridents or something, and the music's going in the background. And I felt a few points like that. We each had our point that we wanted to stick, but we somehow managed to.
Star Trek. Who knew? I know. I love Star Trek. What was it? 3 seasons and still going
Yes, of
strong.
course.
It's astonishing. So, is there a movie coming for Heat 2?
Yes.
Ah,
So the script is being written. Michael's writing the script,
okay.
and so that's all I can say.
All right. So who knows? Might even be a Heat 3. Who could tell? And is there going to be another unsub book?
I hope so. We'll see. It is not my next book. My next book is another novel I am collaborating on with Michael Mann.
Really?
Yes,
But not Heat.
but not Heat. It is a standalone. It's an international thriller, an international manhunt thriller.
What fun for you.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Questions. Some of you probably have them now that you're sitting here so patiently. What would you like to ask?
Speak up. Yes.
I'll go first. Why did Michael Mann want to write a novel of a prequel and a sequel rather than writing a screenplay for another movie?
Good question. Why write a novel? A novel lets you delve into the story at greater depth and length, I think, than a single script could do for the story. And he's up for a challenge. Yeah.
Also, in a novel, you don't have actors, playing part of the role. And in screenplays, I've watched a lot of Outlander screenings with Diana, for example. You don't know for sure what the actor is going to impart, and sometimes what you design physically in a novel can't really happen in a movie or something. The configuration, the castle in Scotland, for example, just didn't conform to.
Right.
We have a person in the audience, I'm looking at you, Tori, who is going to have a movie made out of one of your airplane thrillers. So are you and Annie, this is T.J. Newman.
That's the fantastic New
Yep.
York Times bestselling
And
author
she will
of
be with
Falling
us.
and Drowning. Yes.
She will be with us on August 12th to launch her 3rd airplane thriller. Tori started out writing and working on airplanes and writing on napkins, as I recall, working out a fiendish. It was a really terrible thing, Tori. What were you thinking? Flying across and, downing the plane? I mean, come on. But anyway, what have you learned about making, a movie being made of your book? Because have both of them been sold or just one? I can't remember.
Both of them have been sold.
Okay. So are you in any way engaged in the potential movie?
I am. I'm actually adapting the first one, Falling. So
You
I'm writing a
are.
screenplay for it, which is a whole education and a whole new world. Have you ever written a screenplay?
I have written a teleplay, and I thought, wow, this is fun. This is easy. And then I thought, man, I just wrote $1 million scene because,
Right.
that 90 seconds with the 2 mile long vintage car, cortege going to the funeral. I said, that's probably not going to make it.
There's no budget and
Yes.
imagination that goes into a novel.
Exactly. Yeah. How many 777s do you need to have in here?
Just blow another one up, right? That's,
Right.
That's not a big lineup.
You go to enlist Boeing as part of your collaboration. Wow. No, it's very exciting. Do you have any sort of date for the movie being completed, or is it way too raw at the moment?
Complete the fifth, like
Okay.
Meg did, that's all I just
All right.
don't worry. That's
Good
like
job.
I understand. Right. There are serious NDAs that you have to do if you're doing movie things, right?
snipers around here somewhere. Disclosure.
Well, I only brought it up because I'd read about it, so I figured that there was some news out anyway, otherwise I wouldn't have outed you. But anyway, I think it's very exciting, right?
Oh, it is.
So is there any movie interest in any of your books that are not written with Michael Mann?
All of each of my series has been optioned at one point or another, and which has been exciting and terrific. And so far, none of them has actually made it over the final
Right.
hurdle to the screen. But I'm happy.
Well,
that
it's been weird, between COVID and the writer's strike and everything. I think there's an awful lot of stuff that backed up or stuff that didn't happen. And so it's going to take a while to sort it all out again. Right.
But I write books, and I'm happy to do it.
Do you know the last writer's strike in 2008 brought us reality TV and The Apprentice? I blame writers. I seriously blame writers for where we are at the moment. Wow. Somebody pointed that out to me. I was so upset. Right. So we'll see. Anyway, another question? Anybody has? Yeah.
Was that me?
That's you.
Yes.
That's you, Christine.
Hey, so I'm very much looking forward to reading about the 18-year-old character that you mentioned, and I wonder if there was a reason you chose that age, or were you looking for, I don't know, not a lighter character?
Yeah, why did I add a teenager? A number of reasons. From the character spoke to me. What can I say? I hadn't really put a lot of teenagers into a story, and I kind of wanted to do that. And I thought she's old enough that she has some agency. She's just turned 18, so she feels like she's an adult. Her adoptive mom knows that she really is only a half-baked adult. So, as so many kids are, her ambitions and her gumption outrun her experience and her wisdom in a lot of cases. But Caitlin has got to admire that and want her to succeed on some level, even while she worries about her. And it's always good to put somebody there that you feel for, who's a force for light in the book and in the world, and that you've got to make sure that there's that balance in the story. So I don't know.
There's all that wild energy, too.
My
that
gosh,
only
yes.
teenagers can actually bring.
Yes.
I love that.
So it was fun. I wanted.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yes.
Have you ever considered writing in a genre outside of crime or mystery? And what's your favorite genre to read?
Ooh, good question. Genres. I love science fiction. I love adventure. So who knows? Eventually, where I'll end up. And those are the things I love to read. Whatever I really love to read, I start to think about writing, of course, because I fall into the story, into the book, and I think this is wonderful. This is magical. Maybe I could spin a little bit of that witchcraft too. But crime and thrillers have been really good to me, and I love writing them. So
Astonishing amount of fiction has a crime in it, even if it's not called a mystery. It really does. Les Miserables, for example. Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, all those kinds of things. So the genre thing is kind of a function of internet book selling, where there are called BISAC. I can't remember what it stands for, BISAC, something or other. But anyway, they're tags that are put on books so that the algorithms that you're seeing from Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all can tag other books. But in a bookstore like this, we don't do that. We sort of separated science fiction and romance, but otherwise we have this just great big file, called fiction, which I think is really fun and makes you explore things in a different way.
There's so much great stuff out there, and so many great writers working now that
it's extraordinary.
That I told myself I just have to pick something new every month just to try it. And maybe one author won't hit me that hits other people, but if you spread your wings as a reader, at some point you're gonna find something.
And there's all these
wonderful
mashups going on. Romantasy, for example, for those of you who are paying attention, it's I read one. I was snowed in at Logan in Boston, and I ran out of everything else to do, so I went to Hudson's and I bought a copy of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and I thought it was really an interesting book. There was a lot of dragons, a lot of sex. The sex was not with dragons, and there was a curious lack of logic, but that didn't really matter. But then, I grew up loving the Oz books, and, Dorothy didn't click those, red shoes and go over the deadly desert on any logical path. So I think Romantasy, I'll tell you the other thing that Romantasy has done, and there's some behind us, is there are the most extraordinarily beautiful books being published in Romantasy with, paintings on, they're called forage paintings, but they tend to call them just stenciled. But, and gilded covers and maps and end papers and all, they are just beautiful, and they're not charging a fortune for them, possibly because they're selling, so enormously that the cash flow is outstanding. But I'm excited about it. I think it's great to have books that people buy just because they're beautiful, even if you never actually read it. So, but
yeah, you don't have to read my books, is what I'm saying. Just buy them. Buy them by the pallet. You can use them to start your barbecue.
Listen, this is the new thing. People are always saying to me, what's the next new thing? And I've been pretty good at predicting it. I predicted the rise of the Gothic like 3 years ago, and horror was making a comeback, all of
right.
which is
Yep.
true. And I'm
Yep.
telling you right now,
Horror,
that beautiful
crime, mashup.
books,
Yes.
beautiful books are the new thing.
Sylvia
And I
Moreno
say
Garcia's
that
covers are
because I
outstanding.
just got 3 emails from 3 different publishers listing all of these gorgeous books that are going to be coming out this fall and this winter. And some of them are paperbacks. Some of them are not the $32 hardcover. One of them is a really beautiful $18 paperback. So
I think Barbara likes books.
I do. I love books, and I want people to love books as art as well.
Right.
As a beautiful thing. I really
Agreed.
do.
I do
So
too.
I'm excited about it. It's helpful if the inside is fun too. So, and also if it's not so beautiful and expensive, you're afraid to open it and read it, because that would really defeat the point. And I like the fact that printing has advanced to the stage where they can do this stuff, and it's not making it, something you're afraid to open and read, which would really be.
Well, I do
Too
hope that
bad.
people know that I think the inside of this one is fun.
It is.
Yeah.
And also, I think, tell us about the red thing on the cover.
Oh yes, we were talking about. The unsub in this novel, Caitlin discovers that the killer has been leaving graffiti at the scenes of the crimes, in obscure locations, not obvious. But when she figures it out, she realizes that at every crime scene there is a spray painted broken heart.
Yep.
So
Very attractive.
So that ended
Love
up
it.
on the cover.
There, I thought
Roger,
I
you had a
saw
cover.
another question.
Well, technical authenticity. Okay, that's always interested me. I mean, you seem to take a great deal of pride in making certain that your books are authentic from a technical standpoint. How do you do that?
I make it up. It's
Informed imagination, is that
that's
what you're
the
saying?
perfect way to put it. Informed imagination. I try to have it be real-ish. I think if I haven't talked to a lot of FBI agents to find out where I've fallen down on the investigative procedure for the purpose of dramatic license, and I try to understand the procedure, to understand the big basic things. I try not to get common knowledge wrong. I rewatched Lord of War not too long ago with Nicolas Cage. It's about gun running. And there's a scene where there's an Interpol agent in a fighter jet, like strafing this Antonov. And I'm like, I don't think so. I think Interpol sends out red notices. I don't think that they have fighter pilots out there trying to shoot down.
Maybe they should.
Maybe they should. But I used, when I first started writing, and I knew there was going to be legal aspects to a story, I tried to be extremely accurate with any kind of legal procedure, any criminal procedure. Have I satisfied the elements of this crime before I have someone be arrested? And I really, in the back of my mind, I had, I don't know, a judge or a law professor breathing down my neck virtually, trying to see if this was going to, whether I was going to, get kicked out of court. And I talked to to a law professor, and as he was going to read the book, Paul Goldstein at Stanford.
Who's been here and who has written
He
some
is-
wonderful books.
He's won the Harper Lee Prize
did.
for legal
Absolutely.
fiction.
Yep, I love his books.
And I told him, I said, you're going to find out that not all of this stuff might really be like real. He's like, what are you talking about? Get over that. This is fiction. You're not writing a brief. You don't need to prove that all the elements of burglary were here on the page. So just get over it. So,
Right.
I
So
did.
lawyers and law professors write books, but there probably aren't 6 judges that have ever written a crime novel. And when they do, it's synonymous. No, that the books are real murder. The judge has a different name. Anatomy of a Murder. Actually, Robert Travis might have written under. He was an administrative judge. Yeah, and Cyril Hare wrote my favorite legal mystery ever, and he was a judge. He wrote a book in 1935 about, it's one of my, I mean, it really is a phenomenal book. Judges were still going on circuit in England and were preceded by trumpets. And he is an unreliable narrator. I mean, I'm trying to remember, I'm going blank. It'll come. This is a product of age. I will think of the title right before we quit. Patrick, are there any questions from the online audience that you wish to emerge and reveal, or have we covered them all? I love it when Patrick comes out of his hidey hole.
The only question was, can this novel be read as a standalone?
Can this novel be read as a standalone? Yes, it can. Each of the unsub novels features a case, so this can be read on its own, and I hope people would enjoy it. That said, of course, Caitlin is a continuing character. She has family. She has a boyfriend. That thread carries through, but and there are a few loose ends in each of the books. But I just do that in all my books, whether they're a standalone or a series. So yes, you can read this as a standalone.
Pat or Jacob, you got my book? Oh, okay. Wonderful.
Yes, Caitlin's dog is named Shadow. That's not the shadow of Shadowheart.
Thank you, dear.
But yes, Caitlin's deer mutt makes an appearance. So she doesn't really get into trouble or cause Caitlin problems in this one. She's a good girl.
Excellent. Anybody else have a question? Tori.
Commercial litigation. I was not a criminal defense lawyer or a prosecutor, but
Now that you've had this, the way that your life has gone, would you, if you had it to do over again when you went to law school, would you have done criminal law?
no.
No. So this isn't some sort of like
No, this is wish fulfillment. No, this is no. But this is a very safe way to practice criminal law without the possibility that a client could be sent to prison or I could unjustly convict anybody or something like that.
Wow, could I get you to come to Pong Shepard's July 9th debut? Because the whole point of her novel, using a form of quantum physics that is sort of hard to explain, is that people get to go back and decide what choices they made they would do differently. And so I'm planning, just so you know, if you come, and I will confess to mine, to ask people in the audience if they would like to tell us what's the one decision that if they had a do-over, which is what happens in this book, what one thing, if you had a do-over, would you do? I think it's a really complicated book, and you have to track different sections of it. You get to like page 49, and then depending on what your answer is, you go here and there. It's really a fascinating form, but it really made me think about, that if you had like one thing that you could do. So you brought it up, and I thought, really resonated. It's going to be an interesting event. You should all come, right? Be prepared. So we've come to the point where we probably all sat on these chairs long enough. But I like to give away a book to thank you all for coming. And if you bought a book, you have a number, and I think there are like 7, 1 through 7. Does that, anybody remember? No, you can't hold up your hand if you have number 8. That'll give it away, right? Anyway, so this is called When Cicadas Cry by Carolyn Cleveland. It's a debut by a South Carolina attorney, who finds a lawyer with a past and his indomitable detective entangled in secret lies and murder in a small southern town where a high-profile murder case, a white woman bludgeoned to death with an altar cross in a rural church on Cicada Road. How's that for really gripping?
All right.
Anyway, would you like to pick a number between 1 and 7?
7.
Is that you? Well, you're here all the time, so I'm happy to give you A thank you is a book. You betcha. So, let's give Meg a round of applause to thank her
Thank you
for
so much
a
for
great
coming.
evening.
For struggling through the heat tonight. I appreciate it. And thank you, Barbara. For
Oh, really? I've
conversation.
almost thawed out. Did you notice? I was able to drink water without it cascading down me. It's so weird. Anyway, this would be a great time if you would fold up your chairs, lean them against that wall, not this one, because they will slide down and take your feet out. And Meg will stay here. So if you line up by number, you can talk to her, get your photo, whatever you want to do. Thanks for coming.